For 10,000 years, humanity lay hidden in the dark, sealed away in silence deeper than any night the galaxy had ever known. Most believed we had vanished. Others thought we had destroyed ourselves. A few ancient records whispered that humans had simply gone to sleep, but no one alive remembered why. And tonight, after ages of stillness, a single signal pulses through the void, faint but unmistakably human. It carries no message, no code, no warning, just a heartbeat, and the entire galaxy stops to listen. Long before the great archives crumbled into dust, humans were known for one thing above all else. When they rose, the galaxy trembled, not because they were cruel or monstrous, but because they were unpredictable, relentless, and endlessly curious. They were makers of wonders and disasters in equal measure. Their allies admired them, their rivals feared them, their enemies tried to erase them. And when the last human outpost dimmed its lights, the rest of the stars exhaled in relief. That relief did not last long. Civilizations rose and fell. Old empires fractured. New ones gathered strength. Entire species evolved, exploring sectors that humans once claimed. Some built monuments over forgotten human cities. Others wiped every trace of us away, convinced that silence meant extinction. Stories turned to myths, myths into legends, and legends into ghost tales told to scare reckless children away from abandoned star lanes. Yet deep beneath a dying moon, orbiting a quiet star, hidden under layers of stone and metal, humanity had not died. It slept in a vast cradle, millions of them held in a dreamless stasis designed to last longer than memory. Only a few caretakers remained awake, quiet figures who tended machines older than recorded history. They knew their duty. They knew the oath given long before the galaxy forgot humanity's voice. And they knew one day the sleepers would wake. That day begins with a lone caretaker standing in the cold glow of ancient consoles. Her name is Leora, the last descendant of those chosen to guard the cradle. She has never seen another conscious human before. She has only walked among chambers filled with silent faces preserved in crystal blue light. She has whispered greetings to people who cannot hear her and told stories to a future that may never arrive. But she has kept the promise: never let the cradle fail. Tonight, for the first time in her life, the machines shift. The old systems stir like a giant stretching after 1,000 dreams. Soft tremors ripple through the cavern, brushing dust from carved pillars etched with forgotten symbols. Lights flicker awake, turning the darkness into a field of scattered stars. Leora feels her breath catch as lines of data scroll across a screen that no one has touched for generations. It takes her a moment to understand what she's seeing. A heartbeat, a human heartbeat, not from the sleepers around her but from somewhere out there in the galaxy. The signal is weak, broken, nearly lost in cosmic noise. But it's enough to trigger the awakening protocol. Enough to set ancient safeguards into motion. Enough to stir the cradle. Outside this hidden moon, word spreads quickly. Ships patrolling the outer systems report the pulse. Research stations identify the signal pattern. Old species with long memories grow uneasy, recognizing an echo of something their ancestors once feared. The galaxy's councils meet in emergency convocation. They tell themselves they are prepared. They tell themselves humans were only dangerous because they were young and restless. They tell themselves that after 10,000 years, any surviving humans must be weak, confused, harmless. But not everyone believes that. Among them is an old archivist of a crystalline species, one that once fought beside humanity in a war now erased from official records. It remembers how humans fought not just with strength, but with something far stranger, an instinct to adapt faster than any enemy could predict, to resist even when logic said to surrender, to rise after every fall. And now the archivist shivers with a memory that is not fear, but anticipation. If the humans wake, everything will change. Back on the moon, Leora steps through the vast chamber where countless sleeping pods line the walls like frozen waves. Each one holds a human, someone from a world she has never known, a time she can barely imagine. She stops at one pod near the center of the chamber. A faint haze swirls behind the glass. A slow pulse glows in the corner of the pod, syncing with a distant signal from space. Someone is waking. She places her hand on the cold surface, her voice trembling as she whispers, "It's time." The machines answer with a low hum, deep and resonant. The pod's internal lights shift, turning from soft blue to pale gold. Leora steps back, heart racing, knowing the protocols were designed for a purpose lost to history. She doesn't know if the waking humans will be peaceful, or confused, or furious beyond reason. She only knows that she has done what she was meant to do. Then the ground rumbles. Massive doors, sealed for millennia, begin to unbolt and slide open. Stone grinds against stone. Air rushes through tunnels that have been still for ages. And from the far end of the chamber, a figure appears, tall, wrapped in armor that glows with patterns Leora has never seen. The figure's steps echo like thunder, steady and deliberate. She freezes. No one was supposed to be awake yet. The figure stops only a few meters from her. Its visor shifts, revealing human, eyes tired, ancient, and burning with purpose. He does not speak. He only looks at her, then at the awakening chamber behind her, and the glow of countless pods trembling on the edge of life. Leora tries to ask who he is, how he woke, what he remembers, but her voice won't form words. The figure raises a hand, pointing toward the ceiling where faint vibrations hum through the stone. The signal. Another pulse races through the chamber. Stronger this time. The figure finally speaks, his voice low, rough, and carrying a weight she cannot understand. They found us. Leora's breath stops. Who? She manages to ask. The figure shakes his head slowly. Not friends. Before she can ask more, alarms scream through the cradle. Lights flash red. The great doors behind the armored figure slam shut as something massive arrives in orbit above the moon, something blocking out the stars. And deep in the chamber, the first sleeper draws a breath. The cradle wakes and the galaxy listens. The chamber vibrated with a low, steady rumble, as though the moon itself was whispering a warning. Dust drifted down in thin threads, catching the pale gold light of the awakening pods. Leora stumbled back, her heart pounding as the armored figure stepped between her and the nearest pod, as if instinct alone told him to protect the waking human inside. The alarms blared again, shrill, uneven, panicked. These machines had slept too long. They were doing their best to follow ancient instructions, but even Leora knew the systems were degrading. Sparks flickered along one of the overhead beams. A faint crack zigzagged across stone that had been perfectly sealed for thousands of years. She told herself it was only the old mechanism struggling to work again, but she couldn't ignore the pressure building in the air, the way the ground quivered as if something enormous pressed against the moon from above. The armored figure turned toward the nearest console. The moment he touched it, the cracked screen steadied. Symbols she had studied her entire life, symbols she barely understood, shifted into new patterns. His hand hovered over the controls as though the muscle memory of another age guided him. He didn't speak, he didn't explain, but Leora saw his jaw tighten as lines of red warnings raced across the display. Her breath caught. She knew the color of trouble, even if she didn't know the language. "What are we facing?" she whispered. The figure didn't look at her. He watched the readings, the slow shift of one glowing line that made every console light flicker. "Not a patrol," he said. "Not a curious scout ship." His voice was quiet enough that she had to strain to hear. Something found the cradle. Something big. Leora felt her chest tighten. She had always believed the outside galaxy had forgotten humanity entirely. That was the point of the cradle: hide the sleeping humans until the time was right. She never guessed anyone would come looking, never imagined anything large enough could lock onto the faint signal that had pulsed across the stars. "Are they hostile?" she asked. He finally glanced at her. His eyes held a depth she couldn't read. Fear, exhaustion, memory, all layered together. Anything that comes to a dead moon carrying weapons hot enough to shake the crust isn't looking for conversation. Leora shivered. The air around them grew colder as another alarm burst to life. A new tremor shook the ground, forcing her to steady herself against a railing. Behind her, the pod glowed brighter. A faint outline moved beneath the frosted glass, low, weak, but unmistakably alive. The sleeper's breath fogged the inside of the pod with each exhale. She had waited her entire life for this moment, imagined a gentle awakening, imagined speaking softly to the first returning human. But the universe had no interest in gentleness. The armored figure turned back toward the pod, standing close enough that his armor brushed the surface. "They're waking too soon," he murmured. Leora didn't know if he meant the sleepers or the danger outside. She swallowed hard. "We can stop the awakening cycle." "No," he said immediately. "That would kill them. The protocol has already passed the threshold." She'd never seen the protocol run this far. Her teachers had warned her what could happen if it was interrupted mid-cycle. Organs would fail. Minds would break. The cradle was built to wake slowly, safely, not like this. A heavy thud echoed from somewhere far above, deep and metallic. The lights flickered. Loose stones rattled across the floor. Leora pressed against the railing, fighting the instinct to run. "What do they want?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. The armored figure stepped back from the pod and looked toward the upper tunnels, the ones leading to the doors that had sealed the cradle since before her family line existed. "They want to know if the stories were true." "What stories?" "That when humans woke again," he paused, "the galaxy would change." Leora didn't know how to respond. She didn't even know if he believed those words or feared them. She only knew he carried them heavily. A faint hiss filled the chamber as the pod's glass began to clear. Leora froze. The figure inside was outlined in soft, gold-white light. A hand twitched. A forehead pressed lightly against the glass. A slow breath pushed fog outward again. The sleeper's eyes weren't open yet, but the muscles in the face moved in faint patterns: confusion, effort, instinct. Leora covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "They're waking." The armored figure didn't move. He watched the pod with an almost reverent stillness. Then his voice dropped to a quiet tone. "He will be the first to see the galaxy as it is now. And he won't be ready." Leora's gaze snapped to him. "Neither are we." He gave a faint nod. "That's why we have to move." She expected him to say he needed weapons or access to outer sensors. Instead, he walked to the massive support pillars that lined the chamber. Each one was etched with symbols older than any archive. She'd always assumed they were ceremonial, decorative, a record of forgotten ancestors. But when he placed his hand on one, a deep pulse rolled through the pillar, bright, smooth, alive. Leora stared. "What is that?" "Hidden systems," he said softly. Your caretakers never knew everything buried under this moon. He pressed harder. The pillar split along a seam she had never noticed. Panels retracted, revealing a narrow corridor glowing with soft, pale light. Leora felt her stomach twist. Why didn't we know this existed? Because the sleepers weren't meant to be found. He glanced toward the ceiling, but someone found them anyway. The rumble above deepened. A grinding screech echoed through the tunnel's metal scraping against stone. The armored figure tensed. They're breaching the outer shell. Leora's pulse spiked. They can get through. If they brought the kind of equipment I think they did. Yes. Her knees felt weak. She had never fought anything. She had never even met another species from the galaxy. Her entire life had been spent in quiet halls and maintenance rooms, memorizing old codes, keeping ancient machines stable. She wasn't ready for this. None of them were. Why us? She whispered. Why now? The armored figure watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke with a calmness that felt entirely unreal. Because humanity wasn't supposed to wake until we were needed. His eyes narrowed. And something out there thinks it needs us. The words made no sense, yet they carried a weight she didn't question. The pod behind them hissed again. A sharp click echoed through the chamber. The glass began to slide open. Leora turned, heart hammering. The sleeper's eyes fluttered. A hand reached upward, not in strength, but in instinct, as though grasping for something remembered in a dream. His breathing quickened, shallow and confused. The awakening cycle wasn't gentle. He wasn't supposed to feel it this fast. She rushed forward, catching his hand, steadying him as he tried to sit up. His skin was cold, his muscles shook, his eyes blinked open, slowly and focused, then sharp, then unfocused again. She leaned in closer. It's all right. You're safe. Just breathe. He blinked at her, struggling to shape words. His voice came out rough, barely a whisper. Where am I? The armored figure stepped closer. Welcome back, he said quietly. We don't have much time. The sleeper's gaze drifted between them. Confusion clouded his features as he tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Leora caught him, supporting his weight. He wasn't ready for anything beyond standing, much less danger. Who are you? The sleeper asked the armored figure. His answer was cut short by a violent tremor. A deep boom thundered above them. Dust cascaded down like gray rain. Somewhere in the distance, metal snapped like broken bone. Leora looked up in horror. There inside, the armored figure turned sharply toward the corridor hidden within the pillar. We move now. Leora swallowed hard, helping the newly awake man to his feet. His legs trembled under him, but he managed a single step, then another. Behind them, more pods began to glow, a ripple of awakening moving through the chamber. Leora felt a chill run through her. Too many, too fast. This wasn't the orderly revival the cradle was built for. This was a race against something vast, something unknown, something closing in. The armored figure started down the narrow corridor. Leora followed, guiding the unsteady sleeper. As they crossed the threshold, another distant explosion tore through the moon, and the lights flickered wildly. The last thing Leora heard before the door sealed behind them was a sound that froze her blood. Heavy footsteps. Not human. And getting closer. The hidden corridor swallowed them in cool white light, humming with energy that felt different from the rest of the cradle newer somehow, or maybe simply preserved better than the ancient chambers behind them. Leora kept one arm around the awakening man's back, helping him keep his balance. Each step was unsteady, as though he were learning how to move again after centuries of stillness. His breathing was sharp, his muscles trembling, but his eyes, those were steadying faster than the rest of him. They darted from wall to wall, catching details, memorizing shapes, studying symbols as if something buried deep inside him recognized pieces of this place. The armored figure moved ahead, silent and focused. Leora didn't even know his name, and she wasn't sure he would give it if she asked. There was something in his posture, his voice, the way he interacted with the machines. It all hinted that he wasn't just someone who had woken early. He knew things. He remembered things she'd only seen scratched in old caretaker journals. Another rumble shuddered through the moon, a low, angry groan that vibrated through the corridor walls. The sleeper flinched, but Leora tightened her grip on him. It's all right, she whispered. We just need to keep moving. He looked at her, confused but trusting for the moment, and nodded. The armored figure glanced back. We're not far. The inner passage leads to the monitoring core. From there, we can see what breached the outer shell. And then what? Leora dared to ask. We decide how to survive. He said it so simply, but the weight behind it was impossible to ignore. Leora felt the same cold dread she'd carried since the alarms began. Survive what? As they moved deeper, the corridor opened into a wider space, its ceiling rising high into a dome lit by a swirling pattern of pale energy. Smooth consoles encircled the room, each etched with markings in that same old language. The armored figure approached one of them and tapped a panel. Light flared, bathing the console in shifting blue and white. Leora helped the sleeper lower himself to a bench carved into the wall. He leaned back, eyes half closed, breathing steadying. She watched him for a moment, wondering what kind of life he had lived before being sealed away, what he had lost, what he would wake into. The console chimed sharply, snapping her attention to the armored figure. He stiffened. His voice dropped into something tight and controlled. It's worse than I expected, Leora swallowed. What is— He gestured toward the screen. It showed a dark shape breaking through the moon's fractured crust, something massive and angular, its hull lined with deep grooves like scars. Leora leaned closer, her stomach turning. She recognized the symbol on the ship's plating, a jagged crest she had seen only in warnings left by early caretakers. Raiders, she whispered. Old records said they died out. They didn't, the armored figure said. They evolved, expanded, and whatever they became. They're scanning for human energy signatures. Why would they want humans? She asked, though a part of her didn't want the answer. The figure hesitated before speaking. Because humans were feared, studied, weaponized by some, he paused, and hunted by others. Leora felt cold creep through her chest. She looked toward the awakening man resting on the bench. His eyes were open again, watching them with a mixture of confusion and fear. What do they want with us? He asked, his voice raw. The armored figure met his gaze. They want what they've always wanted, to make sure humans never rise again. The man stared back, struggling to process that. Why? What did we do? You existed, the armored figure said quietly. The sleeper shook his head slowly, trying to piece together the fragments of memories that flickered behind his eyes. I remember. Light, cities, then war, something falling from the sky. He winced, pressing his fingers to his temples. Leora hurried to his side. Don't push yourself. Just breathe. He nodded again, though his expression was troubled. Whatever he remembered, it wasn't peaceful. Another rumble shook the ground, stronger this time. Dust trickled from the dome above them. Something scraped against the outer hull, metal claws or cutting beams carving through layers of stone. The armored figure strode to another console and activated a different panel. The room dimmed except for a holographic image that shimmered into view. A map of the cradle, the corridors, the pods, and small red points moving through the tunnels. Leora drew in a sharp breath. They're inside. Not many yet, the armored figure said. Probably a first wave scouting. The sleeper's jaw tightened. Can we fight them? You can barely stand, Leora said gently, though the fear in her voice made it sound sharper than she intended. I'll stand if I have to, he replied, breath shaking but determined. The armored figure studied him for a long moment. Your cycle isn't finished. Your body isn't ready. But, he turned to the map again. We don't have the luxury of time. Leora stepped forward. What can we do? Slow them down, the figure said. Buy time for more sleepers to stabilize. And keep the raiders away from the core of the cradle. If they reach that chamber before the full command systems awaken. Leora felt her throat tighten. How many are waking right now? Too many, he said, and not enough. She didn't understand, but there was no time to question it. The armored figure reached into a compartment in the console and pulled out a small device, a smooth metal piece, palm-sized, glowing faintly. He handed it to Leora, her eyes widened. What is this? A signal dampener. It masks your life sign. He glanced at the sleeper. I only have two. One for you, one for him. She stared at the device in her hand, realizing what that meant. And you don't need one. That's not an answer. He didn't offer another. Instead, he walked to the sleeper and placed the second dampener in his trembling hand. When we leave this room, the armored figure said, they'll be able to sense us, but they'll sense me most clearly. I'll draw them away. Leora stepped forward, shaking her head. You can't go alone. You'll be outnumbered. I'm used to that. That's not— She cut herself off because the sleeper was watching her, and his expression said he understood the truth even if she didn't want to. The armored figure wasn't meant to survive this part. The sleeper struggled to rise again. I won't sit and hide while you fight alone. You're not hiding, the armored figure said. You're protecting the cradle. If the raiders capture even one unstable sleeper, they can trace the entire network. Leora's breath caught. The stakes were far bigger than she'd imagined. A sudden metallic shriek tore through the corridor behind them, loud, violent, close. Leora flinched. The sleeper pushed himself fully upright, shaky but determined. The armored figure stepped back, visor shifting to a hard, bright glare. They're here. Leora's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She turned to the sleeper. Can you move? He nodded once. It wasn't confident, but it was enough. The armored figure opened the door on the opposite side of the monitoring core. Lights flickered, illuminating a tunnel that sloped downward into deeper parts of the moon. Go, he said. Keep going until the passage splits. Take the left path. It leads to the nested chambers. Stay hidden. I'll meet you there. Leora wanted to believe him, wanted to think he could cut through raiders the way old stories described human soldiers of the past. But this wasn't a story, and the thudding footfalls growing louder behind them weren't waiting for the perfect moment. Before she could speak, the armored figure placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a grounding touch, firm, almost gentle. Keep him alive, he said. Leora nodded, throat tight. He turned away, drawing a deep, steadying breath as the door behind them shook violently. Then he stepped toward the danger. Leora grabbed the sleeper's arm, pulling him into the downward tunnel. The door sealed behind them with a hiss. The last thing they heard before the passage curved out of sight was the sound of metal tearing, and the armored figure's voice, calm, steady, unafraid. Come find me. Then, the tunnel sloped downward in a tight curve, the walls pulsing with a faint blue light that breathed like a living thing. Leora steadied the awakening man as they descended, each step echoing into the silence. Behind them, The distant clash of metal and the low tremors of impact rolled through the stone, muffled but unmistakable. She tried not to picture what was happening to the armored figure back in the monitoring core, tried not to imagine how many raiders had reached him, but the sounds kept coming, sharp and violent, and each one made her grip tighten. The sleeper leaned against her, still unsteady but pushing himself forward with a determination she found both frightening and inspiring. His breath came fast, but he didn't complain. Every so often he looked back toward the path they'd left behind, as if torn between escape and the instinct to fight. Leora didn't blame him. A part of her wanted to turn back to the corridor leveled out, opening into a chamber she had never seen in any caretaker maps. It was vast and hollow, shaped like the inside of an ancient seed. Pale strands of light hung like roots from the ceiling, humming softly as they wavered in the still air. The sleeper stared upward, his expression shifting, first confusion, then something like recognition. "You've seen this?" Leora asked softly. He nodded, rubbing his temples. "Not this place, but something like it. Long ago, before the wars." His voice wavered. "I think we built these chambers. Or my people did. That feels impossible." She whispered. He met her eyes. "So does waking up after 10,000 years." Before she could respond, a low rhythmic thud echoed from deep within the tunnel they had descended. Not the armored figure. These footsteps were heavier, slower, methodical. The ground beneath them seemed to hold its breath between each step. Leora's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're tracking us." The sleeper steadied himself against the wall, the dampener. "It isn't enough to hide us forever. They must be close." A cold chill spread through Leora's chest. The raiders weren't wandering blindly, they were hunting. She glanced around the chamber, searching for another exit. She spotted a narrow archway at the far end, half hidden behind a curtain of drifting light strands. She pointed. "There, we can't stay here." They hurried toward it. The sleeper's steps grew steadier as they moved, his muscles gradually adjusting to the strain. When they reached the archway, Leora pushed the strands aside and found another corridor, this one narrower, winding deeper into the moon. As they slipped inside, the thudding footsteps grew louder, more echoing than before. Leora's breath caught. She pulled the strands closed behind them, plunging the passage into dim light. The sleeper pressed his ear to the wall, listening. "They're close," he whispered. "Too close." "How many?" He hesitated. "Not one. More than one." Her stomach dropped. They moved deeper down the narrow corridor, the walls shifting from smooth metal to polished stone. Ancient inscriptions lined the wall, stories carved into symbols she didn't understand. The sleeper paused more than once to run his fingers along the markings, as if they stirred something just out of reach. "Do you remember what any of this means?" she asked. "Pieces," he said quietly, "flashes. Not enough." They turned a corner and froze. Ahead lay another chamber, but this one was different. Much smaller, almost intimate, lit by a soft golden glow from a single crystalline pillar. Leora approached carefully, drawn by a warmth that seemed to pulse from within it. The sleeper stared at it, breath-catching. "That's not just decoration." "What is it?" she asked. "Memory," he whispered. "Human memory." Leora blinked. "Like a record?" "No." His voice lowered. "Like a soul echo, a container of what we were, what we feared, what we hoped, what we prepared for." He touched the surface gently. These were hidden so deep that no one but us could find them. A sudden vibration rippled through the chamber. The pillar pulsed brighter, as though sensing danger. Light flickered across its surface, forming ghost-like images, cities collapsing, stars burning, ships tearing through void. Leora gasped. The images were too fast, too raw, too real. The sleeper reached out to steady her. "We were attacked," he murmured. "That much I remember. And not just once. Over and over. Until the cradle was the only choice left." Leora shuddered. "The raiders." "No," he whispered. "Something older. Something worse." He pulled his hand back from the pillar, shaking his head. "I can't. My memories are broken. Locked. I don't know how to open them." Before she could respond, the chamber shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. The sleeper spun toward the corridor. There, right outside, the sound came next, metal scraping, claws dragging across stone. A mechanical growl echoed through the passage. Then another, and another. Leora pulled the sleeper toward the far side of the chamber, searching desperately for another exit. She found none. The walls were smooth, seamless. There was nowhere to run. The sleeper swallowed hard. "We stand here." She shook her head. "You can't fight yet. We don't have a choice." The footsteps stopped just outside the chamber. Silence pressed against the walls, thick enough to choke on. Then a shadow moved under the archway. A tall figure stepped through, metallic, angular, its body plated like armor fused with bone. Its face was a mask of polished metal with a single burning sensor in the center. Behind it, two smaller raiders emerged, their limbs sharp like hooked blades. Leora's heart hammered so hard it hurt. She stepped in front of the sleeper, though she knew she could do nothing to stop them. The lead raider tilted its head. The burning sensor locked on them. It stepped forward, each movement smooth, predatory. A sound came from it almost like speech, but distorted, crackling with static. Leora didn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. Its intent was clear. The raiders wanted the sleeper. The sleeper pushed himself upright, arms trembling but fists clenched. He took one step forward, placing himself beside Leora. The raider's sensor brightened. It lunged, but before it reached them, the crystalline pillar behind Leora blazed with sudden golden light so bright the entire chamber flashed white. A shockwave burst outward. The raider staggered, metal screeched. The lead raider stumbled back, its sensor flickering. The sleeper stared at the pillar, eyes wide as if something inside it called to him. The pillar pulsed again, but instead of releasing another shockwave, it spoke, not in sound, but in a feeling, a pressure in the air, a whisper brushing against the mind, a presence older than the cradle. Leora felt her knees weaken. The sleeper grabbed her hand to steady her as the presence grew stronger, reaching toward him, touching something deep inside him. His eyes widened as a flood of broken memories flashed behind them. I remember, he breathed. The raiders recovered. They moved again. The sleeper's hand tightened around Leora's. I remember what's coming. Before Leora could ask what he meant, the lead raider leaped and the crystalline pillar shattered into a storm of golden shards. Light flooded the chamber, and everything for one breathless second froze. The explosion of golden light froze everything for a heartbeat. Leora, the sleeper, even the raiders caught mid-lunge. The shards of the crystalline pillar hovered in the air like tiny suns, each one humming with a soft vibration that made Leora's skin tingle. She held her breath, afraid that even a whisper might shatter whatever force had taken hold of the room. Then the shards moved, not downward, not scattering, but inward, spiraling toward the sleeper as if drawn by a force inside him. His eyes widened in shock as the light poured into his chest, flooding through him like a river of fire and memory. His back arched, fingers clawing at the air as if trying to grasp something he couldn't hold. Leora stepped toward him instinctively. Are you? Her voice broke off as the lead raider staggered back from the shockwave, its metal plating flickering with cracks where the force had hit it. But instead of retreating, it let out a harsh metallic screech and charged again. Blades unfolded, moving faster than before. Leora tried to pull the sleeper away, but he didn't move. He couldn't. His body was rigid, glowing from within, trapped between agony and awakening. More shards sank into him, each one sending a ripple of light under his skin. The raider leaped, and that was when the second shockwave hit. Not from the pillar, from the sleeper. It burst outward in a flash of white-blue that slammed into the raiders like a hammer. Metal shrieked, sparks flew, and the lead raider was thrown across the chamber, smashing into the far wall hard enough to crack stone. The two smaller raiders collapsed in a sparking heap, twitching and hissing as the shockwave fried their circuits. Leora stumbled back, shielding her face as the light faded. When she looked up, the sleeper was on his knees, breath ragged, hands shaking. The glow beneath his skin dimmed to a faint shimmer, like embers slowly cooling. He lifted his head, eyes unfocused but filled with something new, something deeper, something frightening. I saw them, he whispered, voice trembling. Not the raiders, the ones who came before them. Leora blinked, confused. What are you talking about? He pressed a hand to his chest as though trying to steady a memory that didn't want to stay still. We didn't go into the cradle because of raiders. The raiders came later. We hid because something older, something we couldn't fight was coming, and it wasn't from inside the galaxy. A cold chill crawled up Leora's spine. Outside the galaxy. He nodded weakly. We were the last shield. Humanity was the only species that found a way to sense them, to slow them. But we weren't strong enough. So the cradle wasn't just a hiding place, it was a reset. Leora stared at him in disbelief. A reset for what? For us, he said, voice cracking. For humanity. To remake ourselves into something that could survive what's coming. Before she could respond, the ground shook violently beneath their feet. Dust rained from the ceiling. Far above them, deep in the moon's upper layers, something colossal tore through ancient stone with a roar that shook the chamber. The sleeper looked up sharply, eyes wide with sudden horror. They found the core. Leora grabbed his arm. Who? The raiders. He shook his head slowly, fear darkening his face. No, he whispered. Something else just arrived. A deafening crack split the far wall of the chamber, and from the darkness beyond it, something began forcing its way in. The thing forcing its way through the cracked chamber wall wasn't like the raiders. It didn't lunge or roar. It simply pushed forward with a quiet, steady pressure, as though the stone wasn't even there. The darkness behind it bent in strange folds, bending the light, stretching shadows in ways that made Leora's stomach twist. The sleeper's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he looked like someone remembering his own nightmare. That's what we hid from, he whispered. Not a creature, not a machine. A presence. Leora felt her pulse pound in her ears, but she held her ground because running felt useless. The air thickened as the presence entered fully, shaping itself into something vaguely human, as if trying to imitate a form it had once seen. Its edges flickered like fire in slow motion. It didn't walk. It glided, weightless, silent, cold. The raiders' bodies twitched where they lay, responding to the presence like metal caught in a magnetic pull. The lead raider, cracked and sparking, dragged itself upright even though half its frame hung loose. It reached for the presence, as if seeking orders. The presence ignored it completely. Its attention was on the sleeper. You were the last, the presence murmured, though its mouth never moved. The The voice echoed inside their heads with a soft ringing. Your kind tried to stop us once. It did not matter. Leora stepped in front of the sleeper, her hands trembling but raised. She didn't know what she thought she could do maybe. Nothing but her body moved on instinct. The presence paused, observing her with a tilt of its shifting head, almost curious. The sleeper rose slowly behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch steadied her, warmth pulsing faintly through his skin, same as the faint glow still fading inside him. We're not hiding anymore, he said. The reset worked. I'm not the same as before. The presence shimmered, its form tightening. You are weaker, maybe, he said. But I'm awake. The light flared from him again, but this time it wasn't while he controlled it. The glow spread through the chamber, pushing against the bending shadows. The presence hit soft, almost polite, but undeniably pained as its edges peeled away under the pressure of the light. The raider collapsed instantly, its limbs rattling as the force weakened whatever held it together. The presence tried to push forward, to resist, but the light kept rising, growing brighter and brighter until it filled every crack and corner of the ancient chamber. Leora shielded her eyes as the brilliance reached its peak. Then it exploded outward in a silent wave. When the light faded, the presence was gone. Not torn apart, just gone. The chamber was still, the air lighter, the heavy pressure lifted. The sleeper sagged to his knees again, exhausted but alive. Leora knelt beside him. You did it. You actually fought it. He gave a tired smile. For now, she frowned. What do you mean? For now. It vanished. He looked toward the cracked wall, where a faint shimmer remained barely visible like a thin veil of heat. It wasn't destroyed, he said quietly. It retreated. Leora's stomach sank. And it's coming back. He nodded, breath steadying. Not alone. Next time she stared at him, fear mixing with determination. Can we stop them again? He stood slowly, brushing dust from his palms. Humanity can, but not if it stays forgotten. Before she could ask what he meant, the moon's floor trembled again, but softer, almost rhythmic. A low hum rose from the cradle's core, pulsing like a heartbeat. The sleeper looked down through the cracked stones, eyes widening. It's waking more than just me. Leora swallowed hard, feeling the hum spread through the chamber like something ancient stirring from a long dream. Wait, she whispered. What exactly did we just trigger? The hum grew louder. The moon answered. The hum from deep beneath the chamber rose until it felt like the entire moon was vibrating around them. Dust drifted from the ceiling in soft clouds, and faint lines of light traced themselves across the stone floor like veins waking after centuries of stillness. Leora steadied herself, trying to read the sleeper's expression, but even he seemed unsure of what was happening. Then the glow softened, settling into a deep, warm pulse. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt like recognition, like the moon itself understood that humanity had finally returned. Leora let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. So this is the cradle fully awakening. The sleeper nodded, though his gaze stayed fixed on the illuminated lines spreading outward. The systems were waiting for a signal. My awakening. Your presence. Everything we did here triggered it. The cradle wasn't designed to release just one human. It was designed to bring the whole memory of our people back into the galaxy. Leora's eyebrows rose. Memory, not people. For the first time since waking, he looked almost peaceful. Humanity didn't put bodies in stasis here. They stored knowledge, history, culture, everything that made us who we were. All of it locked away so nothing outside the galaxy could erase us completely. It's been waiting for someone to understand it, someone to carry it forward. So what happens now? Leora asked softly. The lines of light met at the center of the chamber, forming a gentle column of shimmering gold. Inside it, shapes swirled, images too fast to fully see, but she caught glimpses of old cities, oceans, faces laughing, hands building, ships soaring. Not just data, lives. The sleeper stepped closer to it. Now we learn and rebuild. The column dimmed as though acknowledging him. A thin arc of light extended outward and brushed gently against Leora's hand. Warmth spilled through her palm, filling her with a strange mix of comfort and clarity, as though the cradle itself welcomed her too, even though she wasn't one of the sleepers. Why me? She murmured. Because humans always chose connection over separation, he said. Even at our end, we believed someone out here, human or not, would help us rise again. Leora felt her throat tighten. We woke you. We triggered all of this. But what about the presence? What about what's coming? He looked toward the faint shimmer still lingering in the cracked wall, though it seemed weaker now, pushed back by the cradle's awakening. They will return. But this time humanity won't be silent or forgotten. We won't be alone either. He looked at Leora. You saw what they fear, a species that remembers its strength. She gave a small, steady nod. Then we start preparing. The chamber's hum softened again, fading to a low, steady thrum like a giant heart settling into a calm, purposeful rhythm. The cracks in the walls stopped spreading. The last echoes of danger slipped away. Leora turned to the sleeper. What should I call you now? He smiled faintly, the glow beneath his skin finally fading to normal human warmth. Just a human starting over. Together they walked toward the lift, leaving the ancient cradle behind but carrying its memory with them. As they ascended toward the moon's surface, The quiet pulse of the chamber followed like a promise, one that humanity, at long last, was ready to keep. And somewhere beyond the stars, far past the edge of the galaxy, something stirred and hesitated.